Hi, everyone. I am thrilled to welcome you to today's session on navigating people analytics careers. We encourage you to engage fully. We please drop any questions in the chat as we go along. If you're interested in expanding your network, feel free to share your LinkedIn profiles with fellow attendees and to connect with them. I'm excited to introduce our moderator, Richard Rosenow. He is VP of People Analytics Strategy at One Model. I'm sure you all know him. He's a key figure in the people analytics space. He's doing a great service in providing job listings, which I've shared in the chat for you. Today, we're going to focus on how organizations define the evolving role of people analytics. And we're fortunate to have an outstanding guest to dive into this topic. So I'll hand things over to Richard, who will introduce our guest, Craig Starbuck.
Thank you so much, Deborah, and thank you, Derek. Thank you, the Northwestern team, for putting these together on a regular basis. These have been a ton of fun. So I am delighted to be here today talking to Craig. So Craig, I've been tracking you. I looked at the calendar. I've been tracking you for nearly 10 years. We've been friends in this space for a long time. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you today. And I think you might be the busiest person in people analytics. That's my bet. So aside from founding teams and setting things up, and we'll talk about the 7 teams you've built, hopefully, you've also written a book, not just any book, but a full statistics textbook for people analytics in R. It's a tremendous resource to the field. You've started the St. Louis People Analytics Meetup, and you founded a company just in your free time on the side. So Craig, I just truly excited to be here with you to introduce you to more people, and thankful for the time you make for the community. So thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Richard. Great to be here.
So for those of you who might not have been tracking Craig for 10 years, Craig, could you talk us through a little bit of your career journey? Might have to abbreviate some pieces, but it'd be really great to hear, how did you find out about this people analytics space? And then make sure we dovetail into what brought you to Chime.
Yeah, well, if we go back maybe 13 years ago, I would say, is when I got really serious about getting into the space. I was on call 24/7 in a production support capacity as an application development manager, leading a team of data engineers. And after many nights of no sleep, I started to think to myself, do I want to be doing this in 10 years? And the answer was no, I did not want to be doing this in 10 years. And so I thought, what do I want to be doing? And so I got out a piece of paper, and I remember sitting at my desk, writing on this piece of paper everything that was interesting to me, whether I had experience with it or had no experience in it. And I wrote down leadership, data and analytics, statistics, and org behavior. And that org behavior dimension was rooted in an elective that I took as an undergraduate student. And I was just very intrigued by kind of the psychology of people and social systems, like organizations. And I thought, I'm not sure what would bring all these seemingly disparate disciplines together. But I started researching, and lo and behold, I found out about this like new and burgeoning field that is people analytics. It was largely called HR analytics at the time. And I kind of created a plan for myself, like, how am I going to break into the space? Because on paper, I'm a techie. I'm a data engineer, application development manager. Like, I know nothing about HR. How could I break into this field? And so for me, I thought the best path would be to go back to school and pursue something that allowed me to learn more about social psychology and research methods and designs in this space. And so on the tail end of the PhD, I found a role at Scottrade. It was a St. Louis-based brokerage firm, and they were looking for someone to lead Workday integrations, kind of that data engineering side, but also lead HR reporting and analytics. And I said, I can hit the ground running on the integration side. Like, that's been my space for a while. If you can take a chance on me to learn kind of this HR discipline and sit at the nexus of all these like different functions within HR. And so they took a chance on me, and it was just a really great foray into the space. I owned employee listening, HR reporting and analytics, learned more about the Workday space and like how we could facilitate self-service and really empower managers with data within the business process flow. And kind of the rest is history. Like you've said, Chime is my 7th organization in which I've built and led people analytics. It's a space that I really, truly enjoy. I wake up every day excited to tackle it. And so, yes, I'm busy and I've done a lot of things in the space, but it doesn't feel like work. And I think when your passion and your work kind of collide, that's like the sweet spot. And I'm super grateful. I don't take it for granted. I'm super grateful that I get to be part of this wonderful community with people really trying to do good, to propel their organizations forward, to support people individually and collectively, and super stoked about being at Chime.
Craig, I'm just delighted to hear that. And that's a story, the latter part of what you mentioned there, that this people analytics space is something that attracts people who want to give back, that want to support people, that want to kind of have that impact, has been something that we hear from a lot of people across their careers. And just it's a delight every time I hear it. So just hearing you talk about it too, and the fact that it stayed true for you kind of throughout your career, then throughout the people analytics space. So as you're thinking about Chime in particular, as you were thinking about kind of making the jump, heading over there, joining that team, what stood out to you about Chime that made that a very exciting move? And I know
Yeah.
Tony's on the line too, so feel free to wink twice if you got to tell us something offline.
Yeah. Tony's great. I think a lot of people know Tony, and just a great visionary in the space. And you want to be a part of an organization with a leader who believes in this space, right? Who knows what great looks like, who knows what people analytics can do. That to a large extent, that can determine the success or lack thereof of the function. And so certainly that was very appealing. But also I'm a builder. I love to build. Call me an entrepreneur, as well as an entrepreneur, I suppose. But like, I love to come into organizations and build new capabilities. I really thrive on ambiguity. Like, it's green field. Like, we don't know what we need, and there's a bunch of like big, messy, complex problems with a lot of nuance, and we need someone to come in and build capability and figure that out. I love that. I've actually never worked in an organization where I stepped into a role and started leading a mature people analytics function. I probably wouldn't be the right profile to do that. I'm not sure what I would do. I like to build new capabilities, and Chime's a build role. I mean, it's a brand new function, very early days. But I think, just kind of stepping back from PA, I think Chime's mission was very attractive to me. And it's really important to me to work for a company that where I really align with that mission. And the company's doing something really great, really innovative. Chime, for those of you who don't know, it's not a bank, it's a fintech, but it provides online banking services like you might think of a bank doing. But it's really helping people, a large contingent live paycheck to paycheck, and it's helping people build credit. It's helping them gain early access to their paycheck. And for a lot of people, that makes a huge difference. And I just think what Chime's doing is really incredible. I wanted to be a part. I love the fintech space. Most of my employers over the years have been financial services. That wasn't by design. It just kind of happened that way. Whether it's Robinhood or MasterCard, US Bank, TD Ameritrade, Chime, I've worked for a lot of financial companies. And I really do enjoy that space just from a business perspective. And so that was certainly appealing to me beyond the opportunity to build another PA function.
That's fantastic to hear. And so as you look back across the kind of different roles where you've built, and you've got this really incredible perspective now across a lot of different companies that have kind of gone from that 0 to 1, early days people analytics, building out teams. If you could give yourself advice, kind of going back in time across these different roles, or as you're coming into this new role, like what wisdom have you picked up that you're going to take and kind of approach this in maybe a different way? It'd be great to share that with the group here.
Yeah, that's a big question, Richard.
It is.
I've got so much. I mean, number one, the landscape's evolved significantly over the past 10 years. And so, going back 10 years, I'm not sure that I would give myself the advice just because the capabilities weren't there. But today, vendors play a very important role in the success of PA teams, right? And try to keep this agnostic, but there are some really great vendors like One Model that accelerate the maturity of a people analytics function. And when I think about what I'm hired to do, I'm not hired to build data pipelines and data models. That's a means to an end. That's a means to doing what I was hired to do. But ultimately, HR doesn't care about that, right? They care about strategic decision support. They care about actionable insights to move their business forward. And the more expeditious we can take, like the more expeditious the path that we can take, the better. That the faster we can do that, the better. We can activate the function by leaning on the capabilities that vendors have already built and already figured out. And so I kind of look at like, what's the role that a human plays on the people analytics team? I would say it's very different today than it was 10 years ago, right? I mean, maybe we'll get into Gen AI, certainly that has very promising applications for people analytics. Comes with some risks and things that we need to watch out for as well. But I think in terms of efficiencies, there's a lot of great capabilities that it provides. But ultimately, I look at what are we uniquely qualified to do as human beings operating in PA? And I think what we're uniquely qualified to do is building those relationships with our key stakeholders. I think so much of our success hinges on our ability to build great relationships, because if we're sitting in a silo and we're just building things that we think will have utility, it would be a chance event if we were successful, right? But we're successful because we build strong strategic partnerships. We know what people partners need. We know what business leaders need. We know what the company needs based on its strategic direction. We're looking around the corner. We're anticipating those needs, so that we're not like order takers. We're not sitting idly by waiting for tickets to come in and just responding, but we're stepping back. We see the forest for the trees, and we're anticipating needs, and we're exercising thought leadership. I always tell my team that, like, don't wait for someone to ask. We're thought leaders. We should know what great looks like. We should make recommendations based on our translation of business anecdotes and business problems into, testable hypotheses and research projects that we can bring to bear on that particular solution, respecting the nuance and the context in which it's being asked. And that's something that I think is really critical for anyone operating in people analytics, is like, we're not just writing code, right? Like, we're building relationships, we're strategic partners. And I think relationships to a large degree determine our success.
Oh, Craig, I think that's fantastic. Yeah, it's people and analytics. It's people analytics, not just analytics, not just data, not just code. I want to really, really focus on one thing you said there, though, around the role a human plays. I think that's a really inspired conversation to have for anyone that's starting a new organization today, especially given the landscape that's changed. That's across all kind of tech landscape. As AI has entered the field, as other technologies have come about, really, what are we making our humans do, and how are we applying humans to be their best positions? I think it's a very thoughtful and mature way to look at people analytics. And so I appreciate that. So as you're looking at the team too, Chime's got an interesting organization. You're part of the SOTA team overall, not SODA, but SOTA. Could you talk a little bit about how that team is set up?
Yeah, absolutely. I have two of those letters. So SOTA is strategy, operations, technology, and analytics. So I've got the tech and analytics arms. And I should probably have mentioned this in your earlier to your earlier question. That's one thing that attracted me to this role as well, because I've seen a lot of different operating models. I've seen some kind of classic HR operating models where you would expect, ops, analytics, and tech to be like tightly coupled and tightly aligned. I've seen, shall I call it the antithesis of that, where it's highly decentralized and fragmented, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing, and that comes with some complicating factors and some challenges that I don't necessarily know need to exist. But I think Tony and team were very strategic in thinking about how do we want to align functions and resources so that we can have the most value very quickly. And I love that the strategy, ops, technology, and analytics sitting within one function. So Richard, you've talked a lot about the people data supply chain. I've used that in so many meetings, and I always cite my sources, which is you, my friend. But I think that is the right way to look at the ecosystem, right? Because if we're just focused on downstream data marts and we have no regard for the systems in which data are generated or the human actors that play a role in like facilitating business processes on the ops side and the upstream policies and procedures that business processes operationalize, we're only looking at one sliver of this, right? And so it's part of a broader system. And I always try to like step back, like if we see data quality issues, like step back and think about like what's the broader system? How did that happen in the first place? and how do we make sure it doesn't happen again? Maybe it's a validation rule in the UI in a system, or maybe it's a better documented procedure on how a human needs to do something, or maybe it's something that needs to be systematized because it's like an offline mapping that's being manually maintained, and there's some inherent risk when a human manually keys in and enters data into a system. But usually there's a solution. I mean, in the year 2024, I mean, we can return rockets to their launch pad, right? Like we can figure this stuff out, right? Like I refuse to believe that it's impossible. Like everything is possible in the year 2024. And so I just think it's super important that we step back and we look at that. And I think the way a team's structured will facilitate that, or will be a deterrent from being able to do that.
I really appreciate that. Yeah, and Craig, I'll be watching you all closely, because that model of strategy ops, tech, data, and analytics, and that flow of that people data supply chain is something we're seeing more and more often, that more teams are heading that direction, and being able to kind of integrate and look across and dramatically reduce the politics between those teams, reduce the friction between those teams to be able to accomplish results. And I try to stay away from plugging our own papers, but that's one paper that we put together about the supply chain. I'll put that in the chat. And by the way, I love everything that's coming through the chat so far. Please keep the comments coming. Please keep questions coming. The Q&A is open. We'll be getting to Q&A around the 45-minute mark. We'll go off the recording then, but feel free to drop things in. I've got that on my side panel here too. So if something pertinent comes up, I'll make sure I'm watching that. But really, Craig, you've got some open roles on your team. And you've got some open roles across your other teams too, across that SOTA organization. Could you spend a little bit of time? I know a lot of people on the call are either interested or know someone who's interested to learn more about that space, to learn more about the opportunities that are there. Could you tell us about what you're looking for on the team?
Yeah, I'll speak to the technology and analytics roles. I would just encourage everyone to check out the Chime careers page. If you're interested, please do apply. I'll also just share, I have more LinkedIn messages than I can realistically respond to. So if I haven't responded, it's in no way a reflection on you or my interest in considering you for a role. It's just, super busy schedule, like building this function and diving in at Chime. And so just want to throw that out there. So the best way to get in touch with us is to apply to the role, and we'll review the resumes and applications and kind of work through the process. So I have 4 open positions on my team, 3 of which are people analytics oriented, and 1 is related to systems, specifically the TA tech stack. And so maybe I'll start there. So systems for us encompasses both the TA tech stack as well as the HCM side. So we use Greenhouse for our ATS, we use Workday for our HRIS. And so historically, those have been isolated in terms of administration and governance, and we're bringing those together, and we're thinking about things as one large connected ecosystem of technology. And I think that's the right way to go. But all that to say, we want recruiters focused on recruiting and sourcers focused on sourcing, and we want proper governance and administration over our systems. And so the senior people systems analyst would be focused on administering our TA tech stack, which would be Greenhouse for the ATS, Jim for our sourcing platform. We have a good time for interview scheduling, and we're in the process of implementing a new system to help out with like automated interview loops and questions based on job descriptions, an AI-based platform. So that's the first.
Hey, Craig, maybe before we move on, maybe just a quick question that comes to mind as you're looking at that systems role. And I won't hold you to this, and no need to make a public statement about it, but just as you're looking at backgrounds of people for that particular role, would you be open to someone with a strong analytics background who wants to make a jump into tech? Or are you really looking for like a master in tech in that space who can kind of bring that expertise from the ground running? Either is fair and fine, but I think there's an interesting opportunity for kind of that cross-domain pollination within your organization. Just wanted to kind of float that.
It's a great question. I'm a big believer that if somebody has initiative and aptitude, like we should give them the chance to use their skills and be fungible and try new things. And that's one of the biggest biggest predictors of success is initiative, right? Like I can't teach someone to want to care and want to have initiative and want to try new things that maybe people aren't asking, but they see the opportunity. I think if someone shows up and they've got that drive, they've got the passion, they have the initiative, we're always open to career pathways that may be a bit non-traditional, in that sense, such as like an analytics person moving into that sort of role. So yes, we would definitely be open to that.
That's helpful.
The other three positions on people analytics, so we have a senior manager of people analytics, and we have two senior people analyst positions open. So I'll just talk about each one in turn. The senior manager, it's a senior manager because it's a big role and it's a really important role. And a big part of what this resource will be doing is building out our data foundation. How do we connect all of these disparate applications in a way that facilitates comprehensive analytics, a comprehensive understanding? And so people analytics will own employee listening as well. And so whether we're thinking about like candidate listening, the candidate experience, we're thinking about the hiring manager experience, working with TA, we're thinking about the employee experience, everything from life cycle surveys, onboarding and exit, pulse surveys, employee engagement surveys, social listening, looking at employer brand, Glassdoor, Blind, just like, triangulating all these different data sources to understand the voice of candidates and employees and create that picture. That's what we mean by employee listening. There could be some other things that we ultimately do too in terms of like passive and active O&A. That's not a P0 priority for us, but certainly something that is on the horizon. But data foundations, just simple things like connecting the candidate and the worker record. There's a lot of pre-hire attributes and signals that we can pick up on, and it's difficult to do when those are sitting in disparate systems. So we need a kind of unified, centralized data store to facilitate the sort of connected analytics that we need to tackle. And so that's going to be a huge lift, but very important. And I think along with that always comes data privacy, data governance, security, like what personas need access to what types of data and for what reasons, kind of having a, kind of pre-approved set of use cases versus maybe a data governance framework by which we participatively decision on new requests for data and insights with data privacy and employment law. Those are really critical partners, and we want to build out a really strong relationship to make sure that everything we're doing is with that ethical lens, and it's something that we should be doing. It's something with the, Chimer's best interest in mind. And so just again, comes back to relationships. Like relationships are just absolutely critical to our success. As well as all the dashboards. Like we want to empower people at Chime with data. And I think there's a lot of things that can and should be automated. And there's just kind of like some staple metrics like your attrition rates and I&Y formations and headcount. And there's just a lot of metrics that I think most every organization needs to look at and monitor. But beyond that, there's a set of kind of ad hoc, more diagnostic, unique analytics use cases that we'll naturally be tackling. And I don't know exactly what those are, but that leads to the other profiles. And so as I think about what we need, so I've been at Chime 1 week, right? So my understanding's ever evolving. I'll just kind of throw that caveat out there. But what I've observed and what I think we need most is kind of part one, a people scientist profile. So in the employee listening, ownership, but also the ability to tackle like ad hoc research projects. Like, hey, we've got this question, we have this like theory, let's translate that into a testable hypothesis and let's go after it with data. And that takes a form of like some ad hoc deliverable that we present to, whomever the stakeholder is. The other profile I would say is more of like an analytics business partner position. And while I wish it wasn't the case, every organization I've ever been at, like you got to put together PowerPoint decks, right? Or Google Slides, whatever it is.
Always.
You have to do that, right? Like that's how we present that kind of information, whether it's an MBR or a QBR or the results of some ad hoc analysis. Like that's just part of the job. And so we need someone who's, really great at storytelling, data visualization, packaging information that might be complex and technical into a very non-technical and effective storyline that even non-technical audiences can resonate with. And so that would be the profile that I'm looking for the other senior people analyst.
That's fantastic. I love the breakout between the sort of tech foundations, data foundations, dashboarding, consulting, data science. That's sort of like microcosm of a large team in the long run. But starting with that kind of seed group, as you're thinking about those, And because like on day one, let's say all four of them start on day one, there's going to be some maturity that's going to happen kind of over time as roles shift and change. How would you, for someone that's looking at applying for these roles, setting expectations for like the first year versus multiple years versus kind of setting things out, is there anything you'd share, or what are your thoughts on that flow over time as these teams evolve?
Great question. It's been my experience that like starting out, people have to be somewhat of a generalist. Like we can't afford specialist at this stage, right? Like we can't like I can't say like this is like your narrow job description, like this is all that I need you to do. We really need people who can flex across a lot of different types of work. And I always love, people on the team who are like, I'm just willing to do whatever it takes to make the team successful within reason, right? Like we don't want people like, you know, functioning like a people partner if they're on the people analytics team, right? Like within reason, but we really need people who are just like utility players. They can flex across a lot of things. They've got, some BI chops perhaps, though I think, business intelligence developers, my theory is that will cease to exist in the relatively near future, because I think Gen AI like already have these capabilities. Like you can type in with a natural language prompt and you can spin up a BI dashboard. Like a people partner can do it, a business leader can do it. I know one model's got those capabilities, and I think that's great. So then again, it's like, where do people come in? Where do human beings come in? Like how do we augment our capabilities given like the increasing role that technology is playing in activating and scaling these functions? So I think I just think it's like critically important to have utility players, people who can flex a lot across a lot of different domains, be involved in a lot of different types of projects. And then as the function matures, then I think to the extent that we've demonstrated ROI and, we should, like if we're building the function right, we should be prioritizing those things that have outsized value. We get incremental investments in the function, and we can afford over time to start specializing and building out like distinct pillars, still collaborating. It's still part of one, collective PA organization. But I think, specialty comes with maturity.
That's fantastic. And I love that this group is getting a chance to start at the same time. That's a rare thing in the space. And for anyone that's looking to apply or that knows someone that might apply, that chance to all start together and build this team together with a team that's getting going, it really speaks to the investment pitch that you all were able to make at Chime. And so I know you're on week 2 at Chime, so let's make this question a little bit broader. As you think about how you go about getting investment in people analytics teams, is there any advice you'd pass on to new teams or to people that might be thinking about starting a function, especially to get this sort of investment that you all have at Chime to be able to start a team of 4 from day one? It's an incredible opportunity. And I would love to see if there's any kind of secret sauce or ideas we could pull from you that we could kind of get into the community as a whole.
I love the question. I really think, people analytics is about the business. And if we're working only with people data in the sense that like these are data sources owned by the people function, we're missing out on a lot of opportunity. And so one of my goals is to partner cross-functionally and see what type of data do other functional areas have that can help us tell a story and understand the drivers of business outcomes. Because ultimately, if you're presenting to the likes of a CFO, that's what they care about, right? Like we've got to like translate this into the language of money. Like how are we supporting the financial viability of the organization? And I think, historically, HR has gotten into some trouble by talking about things like employee engagement, because like prove to me that employee engagement matters. Like what is that driving, or what are differences in like highly engaged workers versus highly disengaged workers? And there's decades of research that corroborate that, but I think demonstrating and validating that within your specific organizational context, it is such a powerful move and such a powerful story to tell, and that will get the attention of the CFO and others. And so I think when we can start demonstrating business value and we can kind of model that out, that if we do X, we'll see Y, that's where the investment comes. And you want the CFO on your side, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, that's incredibly helpful. As we're thinking about, one of the questions that came through the chat was around emerging trends in people analytics. And it kind of brought to mind, I mean, the emerging trend we're all talking about, hearing about, is AI within the space, or AI projects within HR. Your team's pretty uniquely positioned across tech, data, and analytics that if AI is going to happen at Chime or across the HR team at Chime, you're probably going to be involved in some way, as well as having the strategy and ops teams as your peers. Could you talk about, are there plans, are there thoughts? Will this team be involved in some of those things early? And if it's too soon, that's fair too. But excited to kind of hear about that as far as trends and how you think your team will be involved.
Yes, my team will be very central to that. That's the short answer. Exactly what that looks like, TBD. But I would just say in terms of like real practical applications of Gen AI to people analytics, what I'm really excited about beyond kind of the conventional use cases that we all probably think about, like summarizing information into like a really succinct, executive summary for folks, is around action planning and democratizing kind of digital coaching for leaders. Because as we think about like something like like an employee listening strategy, you launch like the traditional path, like you launch a survey, you close the survey, you deliver some results. There's usually like a top-down action planning cycle, and it just takes too long, right? It just takes too long. By the time leaders are actually actioning on those results, new opportunities have already emerged, right? I mean, like things like the pace of change is like incredible. And so like we got to be faster about that. And as I think about how do we very quickly, efficiently put into the hands of managers guidance on how to action on their specific opportunities, like that doesn't come from people, right? I mean, there's no way people partners can do that for every single people manager across the organization in a very efficient manner and give them, the time and attention and respect that nuance. And so I think Gen AI, I know it's not as simple as, logical rules. Like we're all logical people and people analytics. Like if this, then that, like there's a lot of nuance that has to be, respected and thinking about the right action plans and the culture and strategic initiatives and things. But I do think that there's a lot of support that we can give to people managers with Gen AI to really help them influence those areas of opportunity which emerge in a very efficient way that humans have just long struggled to do.
But I think that's fantastic. And it's really that practical application is the key point. Because I think there's a lot of conversation, there's a lot of excitement about AI right now, but we're starting to see some of those practical things come across. And I think you spoke to that perfectly. So we've talked about AI. Let's take AI off the table for a second. What are some trends across people analytics you're seeing that are not related to AI, that are kind of coming up maybe in the next couple of years, or how do you see the field evolving as we head into this next phase for teams?
That's a good question. I think, again, I think vendors play a role in this too. The more advanced analytics use cases, like take O&A, for example, I think very few, relatively few organizations invest in that, right? And it's often because it is kind of like a niche type of project. And, whether it's like a consulting firm coming in or like hiring a data scientist, very few organizations have the luxury of hiring a data scientist into people analytics to tackle some of these things. And so I think O&A has so many promising applications, whether we're talking active or passive, ideally both. And I spoke about this a bit at People Analytics World. Like understanding how work gets done, understanding patterns of collaboration, understanding how it happens across a distributed workforce where people are geographically distributed. There's just so much rich data that we can leverage to inform org design, talent planning, site planning, and I think that's just a really underutilized capability. And there's a lot of vendors doing it well. I think a big challenge that we have to overcome is like the optics of like spyware or Big Brother, like we're mining your data, like it or not, and I think that can be overcome in respecting kind of the ethical approach. Like we don't even need to mine the content of communications to do that, right? It can be specific to metadata, looking at who's collaborating with whom, how often, who initiates the correspondence. We don't have to look at the content of the communication. And I think, people are more amenable to like these sorts of projects when we come at it from that lens, and we look at like what's the minimum set of data required to facilitate this analytics use case that we want to tackle, and being very intentional about why we're doing it and what people can expect on the heels of that type of project in terms of benefits to them. Helping managers be more effective managing distributed teams, helping people achieve better work-life balance when they're when their teams spread across many time zones and they're being pinged constantly. They feel like there is no separation between work and personal commitments, because like they're just always on, they're always getting calls, they're always getting pinged. How do you help managers facilitate a more healthy environment for people? And I just think there's a ton of potential there. So that's one way in which I think it'll evolve. I think we'll increasingly be able to tackle more of those complex projects because of a lot of the legacy responsibilities of pipeline development and data model development, data integration. Like that's largely going to be delegated to vendors to manage on our behalf, as well as all the production support that comes with that. I mean, APIs change and feeds break, and it's like, do you want somebody on the team that their sole job is like supporting all these pipelines? Like, I would say no. Like, we shouldn't have that in the year 2024. I go back to my initial story of like being in production support, and it's like I never want to do that again, right? It's like HR jobs aren't as critical as some of the jobs I was working, but even so, like we don't need that today. And so, how do we graduate the way in which humans provide value in a PA context? I think it's changing very fast.
That's super helpful. So Craig, as we kind of close out this first section, we'll get ready to go into Q&A next, and we'll stop the recording for the Q&A. But as we share with kind of candidates or people that are job seekers, there's a lot of folk on the market right now. Do you have any advice for them generally about how to stand out, how to get involved, or how to find their next role? What advice would you have for job seekers in the market?
Great question. I think the first thing I would say is never stop learning. I mean, learning is just like a lifelong adventure, right? And it's so incredibly important. I try to learn every day, right? Like I feel like I have less and less time anymore. But like find like prioritize it. Make sure that it's a priority to infuse learning into your day, because I think given the pace of change, if we're not learning, if we're not constantly on the new frontiers of technology and advancements in the space, like we'll be quickly left behind. And I always feel kind of a sense of like anxiety about that, of like, I don't want to be left behind. I've got to be learning. I've got to be reading. I've got to be following, great people like Richard Rose now, who are like on the bleeding edge of everything that's happening here, because it's changing every single day. And so, I just say like, follow Richard, follow David Green, follow influencers in people analytics, and make sure that you're keeping abreast of like where the space is going, so that you can demonstrate for a future employer how you can uniquely provide like differentiated value to that organization. And it's very clear that you bring thought leadership to the table, right? Because again, like the days of building dashboards and like the fifth grade math problems that are like creating basic descriptive metrics, like that's like table stakes anymore. Like, vendors provide that. And so what do we do above and beyond that? How do we provide value? I think demonstrating partnership, showing initiative, showing that like you can look around the corner and anticipate needs even before they come. Like those are things that like I certainly look for when I'm hiring, because I don't have time to prescribe the what and the how to like each person on my team. I expect that they're building those relationships and they're looking around the corner and they're identifying new opportunities to provide value, aligned with our roadmap and objectives. And I think it's just a critically important skill and capability.
Craig, that is incredible advice. Just from everybody on the call, thank you. Thank you for being on for this section. And with that, we will close out this section. We will stop the recording and we will go on to Q&A.
Sounds great.